Hello and welcome to the yearly blockchain gaming roundup from blockchaingamer.biz. I am your host Jenny Jordan, and with me is co-host John Jordan. All you need is some music there in the background.
Yeah, surely joined by your co-host Father Christmas.
Yeah, so where do we start? I mean, it started well. Everything was on the up, and then everything basically tanked, and there was loads of volatility. And now we are clearly in much of a recovery phase where we're going up. Hopefully that carries over well into 2025, and we won't see such a big fall in 2025. But anyway, let's recap what happened this year before we move on to predictions for next year. So what we got during Q1, we saw pixels really starting to boom following its late 2023 migration from Polygon to Ronin. And sort of with pixels growing, also the kind of anticipation of Ronin, the ecosystem and other games launching on Ronin sort of grew in line with that. We had the Heroes of Mavia airdrop, which I'd completely forgotten about. It's actually quite a big thing at the start of the year, wasn't it? That was a big sort of hope. People were hoping for that. And then we had Portal, HighChain, XAI, Ether, obviously, all these tokens. It's a lot of hype around. And then clearly things changed rather radically in Q2. So what's your sort of take on that from a I suppose gaming point of view, token point of view, general industry point of view?
Yeah, it's sort of funny to look back, and as you say, when you look back, sort of what happened over 2024, some of the things are things that we've pretty much spoken about, almost every week in our roundups. Some of the are just like ongoing trends that are just they're obviously ongoing. So Pixels would be one sort of started out the year covering that as a sort of booming project, and as we'll sort of discuss, it's gone through various sort of stages. It's not always boomed. It's gone through some downtimes, but it's something that's always been there and something that's always been sort of relevant. Whereas some of the other ones, I mean, you mentioned, like I think it was January or February, Heroes of Mavia, this sort of Clash of Clans type game, mobile game that had been in development for a long time, sort of did this airdrop, and it was sort of, we were just seeing at the end of 2023, like token prices in general in crypto were sort of picking up, and actually game stuff was actually doing suddenly November, December 2023 really started to pick up. So stuff like Immutable's IMX in particular, I think at one point it went in the top 25 crypto. I mean, it was interesting then because sort of games were doing relatively well indexed against everything else. It wasn't like a bad time. It wasn't like a bear time. It was sort of coming into the bull a little bit. People were going, "Are we in the bull yet?" And Ethan, Bitcoin were doing okay as well. But games were particularly doing well, and you sort of saw this. This is going to be the next cycle of games doing really well, and some quite not obscure but quite smaller games started doing well. And Heroes Mavia was one of them. And to be fair to them, they've kept building all the way through the year. I've kept playing it. There's actually a bunch of interesting stuff coming out now, which we're not going to talk about. How they're sort of building out sort of off-chain, on-chain tokens. But it's just it did at one point the token, I think it peaked about $10. It's now down to about sort of under $2. So it was a big sort of first injection of liquidity into the market. Some people, obviously guilds in particular, did really well on that game. It was a guild. They sold a lot of NFTs to guilds, and then it just sort of. It did its thing, but wasn't part of the narrative. I mean, I don't really think we've mentioned it again. There'll be a few games that come up like that. But I guess one interesting trend was the increasing deployment through app stores of sort of blockchain-enabled games. Obviously, not as integrated into blockchain as maybe some of us sort of people would like. But another game it sort of launched actually in sort of at the same time as sort of Pixels, really. Nine Chronicles M, so that you can play that through the app stores or play it on PC. It's sort of cross-chain, and the PC one has more blockchain, and the mobile one has sort of in-app purchases. And we start to see that as being, having a blockchain game with proper blockchain assets being available through these app stores, being a thing that lots of even small teams could do. So lots of quite small teams. There's probably hundreds of games on the app stores now which have proper blockchain. They're not sort of scammy games or anything like that. So, I mean, Pixels is Pixels is an example is one that's just stayed on the browser. So not everyone was doing it, but yeah, that's sort of something that will sort of and that's an ongoing trend, and obviously got some quite high profile games coming out in
So it's
2025.
sort of a prediction. Loads of industry experts predicted the growth of mobile Web3 games at the end of 2023. That would sort of be one of the trends in 2024. And funny when you think of it, yeah. So a few games obviously sort of went that way. But if we look at Pixels, like you just mentioned, Pirate Nation, Off the Grid, neither of
Yeah.
those are actually on mobile. You might then sort of go for mythical games, which are obviously going to continue on their successful track of launching mobile games because that's what they do well. But clearly, we still also have studios that realize, our Web3 games are just not working. They're not just well adapted for mobile. So we're going to stick to our vision of the the distribution platform that we've sort of always envisioned our game working the best on.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still the case to go through app stores. I mean, there's strengths and weaknesses of every sort of model. Obviously, if you're going on browser or PC, you can do whatever you like. There's no restrictions on it, but then it's quite hard to sort of get people into those. How do you get people to download a PC game? Obviously, Steam doesn't allow you to even sort of do it. So you're running your own launcher or browser game to sort of bit more easier, but it's obviously sometimes it's harder to build. But when you're going on mobile, Apple and Google have very strict rules about what you do. So you're sort of building an economy basically for those for apps. And even though you have billions of people with the app stores on their phones, most mobile games scale through spending a lot of marketing money, and most blockchain games don't have a lot of marketing money. So we've sort of seen, still that sort of. I think what we've come to realize, people have come to realize, is you sort of either do one or the other. So as you mentioned, Mythical Games are a mobile game company. All their games are mobile games. They don't do a browser version of it. They don't do a PC. They did a PC version of Blancos and it didn't work, and now they're doing a mobile version of Blancos. So pretty much all their expertise is we run through app stores. We talk to Apple and Google all the time. We prove to Apple and Google that blockchain is not a scam and it can make them more money by the way we build our economy. But we have our economy and it's built for app stores. I think probably the idea of we have a PC version and a browser version and a mobile version, that becomes too complicated. So yeah, we'll see. You're right though. I think we did expect more successful mobile games where, at the moment I think we have 6 million downloads of NFL Rivals from Mythical Games. That's the biggest number I've seen in terms of downloads. There's a few people, Infinigod's one of their games. I think they're saying, I can't remember how many downloads it's done, but they're doing quite good revenue sort of through that. Fableborn recently did about $500,000 of revenue through that. So there are some examples of sort of leveraging that, but we've not had the sort of, the game that's done over 10 million downloads and is generating, $1 million a month through in-app purchases. So that's still way off. And I think probably obviously it could happen in 2025, but I think that's, you don't hear people talking about it in the same way, I think, now as you did.
Sort of the big hope was Guild of Guardians, I suppose, which we'll get to.
We'll get on to,
Q2, but
yeah. Just before you move on, the other thing you mentioned, there was lots of sort of frothiness around coins that wasn't very clear what they were for. So Portal would be a great example of this. It was very unclear. I mean, you didn't really know. You sort of knew who they were, but you didn't really know who they were. It wasn't very clear what Portal was about. It's still not very clear what Portal was about. We had a sort of the Mond protocol, which was a bit more about the Pixelmon game. And then they did this thing called the Mond protocol. They launched a token called Mond. It's not really done anything, but Pixelmon as a sort of IP turns up in various games, and they're doing various other games. Something like High Chain that was has launched its own infrastructure. They're a small team. It's taken them a long time to build that sort of stuff out, and they've had some legacy problems around that. And things like Exia, we never know how to pronounce it. Exia, lots of L3s and sort of L2s, and people launching their own. So in Q1, I think lots of people weren't launching their own chains. They were announcing they're going to launch their own chains. So some of that is happening actually now at the end of the year. Maybe we'll get onto some of that. Proof of Plays is a great example of those, the Pirate Nation guys. And pretty much everyone during the year was making decisions around what chain they were going to run on, and a lot of them were moving from Polygon to other chains. So Immutable throughout the year was often talking up all its wins, even though not many of those games are out. And lots of other people were moving to Base, Arbitron, creating their own chains, moving from Arbitron to ZK Sync as Treasure did. Loads of sort of excellent news around for us in the year about that. And then we were starting to see the first of that. And Ethia is one you mentioned, not really a gaming chain. It was interesting though. It was a sort of it markets itself as a gaming and an AI based chain, and basically it is a cloud service in which you can access GPUs. For however you want to use them. You could use a cloud service for gaming. You could use it. You can't really use it to train AIs, but you can use it to do some of the sort of secondary training around sort of AI LLM models. So they launched their own infrastructure. We had sort of also, not in Q1 I don't think, but CARV as someone launching nodes. And even now, Beam is launching node sale. So node sales were a big thing in Q1. Node sales are sort of coming back into it now as well. So a few of those are ongoing. So Q1, I think we thought this is going to be a good year. I think in the gaming space, tokens were up. There was a lot of interest. Lots of projects were there to be launching, and it was a bit confusing. There was a lot of stuff I didn't really understand. There was one we'll come on to a bit more. I think Telegram and Ton, which I was slow onto. I think you were a bit faster onto it than me. But there was just a lot of. Maybe we are at the start of the year. We're very optimistic, and it seemed like it was going in the right direction. Yeah.
No, and I remember, just move on soon, but I remember clearly when we were talking about our predictions for 2024, chain migrations were a big thing there. Like we have these games moving from ecosystem to ecosystem, and there are now so many ecosystems, and like you say, so many L2s and L3s that actually quite a few experts are now predicting the merging and kind of collaborations between these, so that a few of those are just going to stop existing, and they're going to either collaborate with other ecosystems, or you did that great analogy with railways being built, so much infrastructure compared to these actual projects that are going to run on top of this infrastructure that which is all. So anyway, that's an interesting sort of trend to look into as we move into 2025. Anyway, let's move on to Q2 2024. That's what we're at. So top headline, tokens tank. So all of these kind of great sentiment that we were predicting in Q1 got a quite sudden turn. So talk us through more maybe in numbers what happened, and then we got a little bit more exciting news around Guild of Guardians launching, Doomland, Hunters on Chain launched on Immutable, and so. But start with the tokens and the kind.
Yeah. So quite quickly, I think sort of quite quickly into April, as I sort of remember, but certainly throughout Q2. We saw quite a strong reversal of certainly on the token value of things. I can't really remember any major reason. I think there's sort of some on the macro side. There was sort of interest rates were not dropping as fast as people thought, which is obviously a trend that continues throughout the year. They were just getting into the election cycle for the Americans, so that had uncertainty around that. The SEC was still being quite aggressive. I don't think there's any big major reasons, just a general sort of lack of sentiment. And so basically we saw all the gains of Q1 in terms of token prices were pretty much wiped out, and all the tokens went down in price. The gaming tokens went down in price. So that was sort of like and I think I was a bit dismissive of some of the projects launching tokens and stuff in 2021, and felt we had something we didn't mention then is Q1 was sort of the rise of some of these KOLs who suddenly became very important, partly because they could invest their own money. They weren't investing large amounts of money, but they had a lot of followers, and they could like fill out rounds, and we had the likes of Dingaling, who I hadn't really come across before, and Grails, and there's a whole bunch of I won't go into dozens and dozens of these KOLs. And the KOL route was definitely the way to go when people were launching tokens, and they were getting sort of ridiculously good deals, and they were maybe getting free tokens and then getting them all unlocked when the token went live. There wasn't any vesting going on, and then you sort of these people were quite pushy, and they would, Dingaling, I guess, is the most interesting one. And I don't think he's a bad. I have no idea who he is. I don't think he's a bad person, but he's sort of very vocal on Twitter. And if he sees something he doesn't like, he'll dump his bags, and he's very seems to be very open. You never know with these sort of things, but. And I think when the mood is good, those people are just everyone's like going along with what's Dingaling into, what's Grail's investing in. Let's I'm sure there's lots of internal sort of Telegram groups about what they're all investing in, and so when it all goes bad, everyone's like, oh no, nothing to me, and the sentiment, if it's frothy, can go bad very quickly. So sentiment definitely went down. Even Pixels, which we'll come across to again. They had this first big drop off in their audience, so they went from over 1 million down to about 250,000, I think, at one point. When they changed their reward structure. That's something we've seen in the past, where big sort of play to earn games change their reward structure. They lose a lot of bots and extractive players, which is actually what they want. But equally, from the headline, it looks sort of really bad if you lose 2/3 of your player base. So that was like a bad sort of negative vibe as well. Obviously, lots of people are still building. There's lots of, sort of small scale positive stuff going on behind the scenes. And as you mentioned, there were their Telegram games became big actually at this point. I should probably point out. So Telegram as a platform has been around for ages, but in Q1 they had these, Tom was their blockchain, sort of an arm's length blockchain, but they brought it sort of back in house, and every Telegram wallet got a Tom wallet. And you could also make your own non-custodial wallet as well using Ton. And so there's a lot of crypto stuff going on there. And we had the sort of start of, I can't remember what they're called now, Hamster Combat and Catazines. And Hamster Combat in particular was, I still can't believe the quoted figure, 300 million users, it said. And this was the rise of sort of tap to earn. So people are just like senselessly tapping on these very simple games through Telegram in order to get some token allocation. Of course, it all goes a bit horribly wrong as the year progresses. But this was the first time where we were starting to play these games, and I was very dismissive and just said, these are not proper games. This is just like, play to airdrop stuff. These are not real people. And I guess I was starting to get a bit informed by what we were seeing from people like Luke, who runs the CEO of Pixels, who was talking about, even at this stage, talking about we want to give out tokens to people who are going to invest them in our ecosystem and not just sell them. And we're trying to work out how to make play to earn work. It doesn't work at the moment, but we feel like we're making progress. And I sort of felt, maybe it was rightly proved, the Telegram stuff, they were just fixated on big numbers. There was no sort of clever or sort of systematic thinking of how you reward people. So we had that. But as you mentioned, 2 big games went out. So the 2 big games on Immutable, it's interesting to note. So Immutable sort of had a weird year, really. As ever, we sort of became a meme for us, really, about how they kept banging on about how many games they had. We were trying to work out how many games were publicly announced and all this sort of stuff. And we never really sort of fixed that problem of they had a lot more games, they said, signed up than we could ever see announced, like a lot more. But they 2 actually launched. So Guild of Guardians was their big game, so internally developed game. So Gods Unchained was their first one, a bit old now. Guild of Guardians was squad-based RPG through the app stores, only available through the app stores. I'd played the demo versions of it, really liked it. I like that sort of game. I've played it pretty much every day since it launched in May even. Sorry. And it's not hardcore, but there's a lot. If you want to play your sort of daily session, use up all your energy. It's a lot. It's a big time commitment, even though it's like sort of an idle game in that way. But it launched. It's done about 1 million downloads, I think, throughout the year. But it's not. I don't think in any way you could say it's a success. I don't think you could say it's a failure yet. But in terms of like on-chain activity, it's not a massively on-chain game. So the on-chain stuff is more about obviously trading NFTs and then leveling up NFTs, where you burn an NFT to level up the equivalent NFT and a few things like that. Yes, it peaked about 15,000 on the sort of launch day, and now it's down to under 4,000. So there's more people playing that, clearly, because it's mainly a Web 2 game. But you can see it's dropped 2/3 of its audience, and it's a very steady drop down. they're still quite active in terms of events and stuff, and launching new characters. So I'm still sort of doing that. They've actually done quite a big change fairly recently in how to make it a bit more accessible, I think. And there's quite a lot of stuff in there. They've not been as active in terms of giving away tokens as I thought, actually. They did a big one at launch, They're not really focused on that. But anyway, so that was an interesting sort of situation. And then the other big game that this has been this year on Immutable is is
Hunters
it
on
is
Chain.
Boomlands Hunters on Chain. Sorry, yeah, get it right. And this was a game is you can play it on browser or mobile. Actually, I find the mobile version better, but it's not really live yet because its token's not live. So they've gone through various. They're on their. I think they're still on their second season 2 of an airdrop, and they've sort of waiting to get their token out. So it sort of launched okay, did pretty well, I think. But it's that launched in Q2. We'd have thought it would be out by now, and it's not sort of quite clear why it's not. But that's really the case for Immutable. Really, I mean, they've launched their quest thing where you can get gems every day, and they're evolving that. But it's still there's not really the game where you point to and go, "This is Immutable's best game." In the way you go, Pixels is the game on Ronin, and lots of games on Ronin, but you go, Pixels is the one where the stuff's happening, Immutable, you sort of don't have that yet, and that's a big problem for a chain. I mean, I guess we would have thought that would have been not solved, but we thought that we would have a game in 2024 that we said this is Immutable's
Well, maybe
poster child.
it's because, like the way you alluded to earlier, they're so fixated on how many games they have in their ecosystem, on the quantity. Maybe, what's been lacking a little bit might have been that quality, or the push for that quality game. It's very much about we've onboarded, I think they said in 2024, altogether onboarded more than they have totally onboarded previously. So they're now up to 460, 500 games, I think, in their ecosystem. Of course, not what we can verify yet or what's been officially sort of announced, but so that could be a problem, couldn't it? That an ecosystem becomes so big and so fixated on the quantity that it then actually struggles to point out which ones are our sort of big quality games. But they have seen, isn't it, over 4 million wallets and signups for their passport service, and maybe that's because of this main quest that they launched, the rewards campaign, partly. So it's like a build-up, and they should also mention the Immutable token IMX is still sort of performed well throughout the year, hasn't it?
Well, it's still the biggest game token. Yeah. I mean, I would say in Immutable's defence, the passport system, which is just you basically get a smart contract wallet based on your email address, has worked really well. That's been pretty solid. I've used it, every day to claim my gems and buy things, and that's been really good. They were advanced in that. Similar solutions, obviously, Sequence was one. It was sort of the first one probably, and Ronin actually launched his own one called Waypoint as well. So you just sign in with your email and you get sort of a full wallet. So that's been on the tech side. That's been really good. And as you say, 4 million signups is not nothing. I think actually the major problem is more about positioning and marketing. So by banging on about the number of games, then and maybe they say they've had to do this because they felt they haven't had a poster child. But I think a lot of their games, because they've been added fairly recently, and to be fair to them, their EVM chain, ZK EVM chain, only went live really in Q1. The technology is actually not very mature yet. So I think the biggest problem is the technology. They're sort of still fixing a lot of the stuff on the technology. They haven't got good sort of decks in there for trading compared to like the Ronin's Kataka decks, which has been going for years and just works really well. And Ronin Sky Mavis has just built out a lot of boring infrastructure stuff that for staking and they have more experience. And I think Immutable were less experienced on that, and it's taken them longer than they thought. And they had done this sort of big, and to be fair, you say Ronin doesn't even have a ZK EVM, set up at the moment. That's launching next year. So they had different approaches where, Ronin was doing much more internally, and but was sort of historically more advanced than Immutable. And Immutable sort of was swapping its chain structure more and doing this sort of partnership with Polygon. I don't think Polygon is probably the best tech partner. I think maybe some of the stuff is problematic with Polygon. So I can sort of see why they end up in the state of always banging on about how many games they've got. But I think they would have been better off, even if it's just Guild of Guardians. Just it's not going to blow everyone's socks off. But I played a lot of those games. It's a pretty solid. You might complain it's not got I don't know, but Marvel characters or Star Wars like some of the other games. But as a basic game, it's pretty good. Maybe the reason they didn't spend $10 million marketing it is they just realised everyone was just falling out straight away and the retention wasn't good. I haven't seen those, don't know those figures, but I'm just surprised they didn't make. And it is their own game. I'm sort of just surprised they couldn't sort of almost force that issue a little bit, because they've got some good stuff. What looks like good stuff coming down the line, or this Raven Sword game. They're really pushing this RPG, and there's a few other sort of interesting ones. So yeah, it's I can see why they're in I can see why they could have been in feel like they're in a difficult position. But at some point, Jam tomorrow, I think, sort of wears thin. At some point, you want I don't know, some Bovril or something, even if it's not Jam.
I'm not sure it was in Q3 or Q4. Was it Q3 where we then started to see those Telegram games? There was a lot of hype around Telegram and Ton, obviously, like you said, Hamster Combat, Cats and Notcoin and so forth. Gamies, Whatcoin. I mean, was that then during Q3 that started?
Yes.
The token launches was in September.
Yes. So what?
Combat and.
Yeah, what happened with those was the Katizan and Hamster Combat pushed back there's lots of fuss about their token launch, and they kept pushing it back, and they kept changing what you had to do to get the tokens, and really annoyed the audience. So eventually, a lot of those tokens then came out in Q3. So that was sort of and by that stage, a lot of what we would call traditional blockchain games companies, so DAUWs and Goat Games with a sort of Mighty Bear Games with its Goat Gaming, they were quite quick to change, and then we started to see, Telegram as being, the go-to marketing channel. I think that really. I think people had made that decision in Q2, and then they were sort of announcing it to the likes of us in Q3. So that was when.
Well, it's similar to what's going on now with a lot of projects going with AI agents. That has clearly been something they've done under the surface for a long time. It's not something they just decide we're doing now and announcing next week, sort of thing.
Well, some of them.
Oh yeah, possibly. But clearly, that's one of the other sort of big trends during 2024. Maybe you'd say it's not necessarily blockchain gaming. Sort of trend, but equally you can't really not mention it, kind of thing, and how it's now starting to be very obvious that some of the Web3 gaming developers are going to leverage this new tech and in a way enhance the Web3 aspect of things with AI. So anyway, so yeah, we then saw more decline in Q3. Happy days. We did see, isn't that Q3 was Blocklords as well, launching their Blocklords Dynasty, and there was quite a lot of talk about bots. Well, we spoke a lot about bots. I'm not sure the rest of the industry did, but clearly Pixels had noticed it as sort of a big problem in terms of at least wanting to fulfill a sort of vision of play to earn. Already then in June, they sort of drop off, but in Q3, because of their sort of really, what's the word, was determined to sort of tackle the bot issue, they started to actually turn around and pick up a lot of active users again. So do you want to talk a little bit about the bot issue?
Yeah. So I guess the bot thing is also, I think, related to where we were in Q3, and obviously this throughout the year we have these what we call play to airdrop things, where for a fixed period of time people can come in and play a game, and normally they would get some sort of point system and get ranked on a leaderboard, and then when the token goes live, if you were number 205, you get this many tokens. So this is just a general marketing engagement trend that's been been there throughout the year. I think that it's sort of, I'd mention in Q3 a little bit more, maybe as you say, like one of the games I really like, Blocklords, it launched this thing called Blocklords Dynasty, and that was a browser-based companion game. It used some of the NFTs they'd had for actually a few years, but it linked quite nicely into the PC game. But it drove, I think at one point it was 180,000 DAUs. And then as soon as the sort of campaign finished, it sort of went back down to 30,000, and then went lower after various. I mean, I won't go into all the details, but we started to, we're all, because I've been covering this for so long, and I've seen so many games, Alien Worlds and Splinterlands, and then more recently Pixels, go through these very high levels, hundreds of thousands of users, and then almost overnight in some cases, just like crashing down, and it's purely because they've changed their reward structure and all the bots don't work anymore, and so you sort of see these big crashes. So we had a bit of a sort of debate, and it was sort of also linked to the Telegram stuff because we were seeing these very high numbers from Telegram, and I guess as you say, it boils the problem down to what exactly are you trying to do. Blockchain in particular is a very viral environment because you're giving away real value or things that can be sold for real value. So if we decided tomorrow we're going to give away £5 to everyone who comes to our front door, very quickly we have a big queue of people outside our front door who were giving away £5. So we could do that, but why would we be doing it? So that's the sort of thing, and I think say Luke from Pixels started to. I'm sure lots of people think about this, but he publicly, this became like his stage of what he was doing, trying to do on his game, and so people who weren't saying that, I think, sort of look bad in comparison. So and the other thing also with Blocklord's also launched on Base. So again, not spoken about Base before, but it's an L2 from Coinbase. It runs on Ethereum, doesn't have its own token, and that was. I wouldn't say it had a breakout year, but there were certainly people launching their tokens. If they were already on Ethereum, they were launching their tokens on Base as well. And there's a DEX called Aerodrome that had some quite good sort of DeFi rewards on it. So we had the Lords token from Blocklords went live on it. The Tower token from Animoca Brands went live on it. The Mojo token from Mojo Melee went live on it. I mean, loads. And
the B3 the gaming kind of chain was announced during Q3, wasn't it? And the B3 token. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. I mean, they're from Coinbase actually, but so we just had a sort of a lot of this sort of. I think just in the industry, people became aware about, even though sort of these numbers are vanity numbers, people were understanding you could, that bots sort of could be good because it did get you headlines, but equally, what exactly were you doing with these? And it didn't matter, if a bot's spending $10 to play your game, that's no different to a human spending $10 to play your game. And as we'll probably get to at the end of the year, maybe we're seeing a real, it doesn't really matter how many players you've got. It is about wallets, and it doesn't matter, and if a bot player has a wallet and has access to those tokens and it's spending in the game, then, that's sort of an interesting new model. You don't need humans. But anyway, in Q3, I guess the other thing was, and I guess it links back into what you were saying about play to airdrop campaigns. We saw this work really well on Ronin. So Ronin as a chain, again, a bit like, Ronin and Immutable are sort of, from a journalistic point of view, we'd see them as rivals. I think there is some rivalry between some of the people at the top of those companies. I wouldn't say everyone in those companies, but some of the more spiky individuals have had spats on X around this sort of stuff. And we did start to see, I think, that Ronin was starting to put out some really interesting games and sign-up games. It's still a much smaller, 20 games, 30 games, I don't know how many it's got now. But some of those were running sort of closed betas and play to airdrop campaigns. So Lumiterra was sort of an interesting one that came a bit left side, a browser-based MMORPG. No, it was PC-based MMORPG. And it had, for its first closed beta, it did very well. It got 700,000 daily active users at peak. That wasn't actually people playing. That was people sort of just signing in to maybe get some rewards. It's just finished actually its second one now, and it got up to about 300,000, I think. So that's a sort of a big one for next year. But there were other games on Ronin. There was Aperon, which actually launched its sort of stuff in late 2023. PC game went live on the demo version, went live on the Epic Game Store. Token went live early in the sort of Q1 period, and they sort of was driving over 100,000 daily active unique wallets. I don't think they were all players. They were doing other things in the ecosystem, but that's been there and about throughout most of the year. It's just gone live actually in Southeast Asia through the app stores. Wild Forest, a mobile and PC strategy game that I quite like. They launched, I think, in the summer, and their tokens literally just gone live this week. They were driving again quite high numbers of wallets, partly because obviously they're doing this. You're on a leaderboard, you're going to get some of these tokens. So it's interesting to see what sort of drop off you get when the thing goes live. It doesn't look like there's too much drop off at the moment, actually, but we'll wait to see. Another game, one of the Ragnarok games, Ragnarok Monster Worlds, again drove 300,000, I think, daily actives at its peak. Actually, but then went live through the app stores just in Southeast Asia. Doesn't seem to have done very well since then. So not everything on Ronin's a success, but they have a half a dozen games I sort of say in general to everyone, if you launch a game on Ronin, you can be guaranteed you get 100,000 wallets coming in just to check it out, and maybe 50, 60, 75% of those are bots or extractive players who just want to see what can I get for free and then move on to the next one. We don't see everything on Ronin be a success, but we know in Ronin there are these wallets who will log into new things. And at least that gives you a starting point. I mean, again, this is a Q4 thing, just announced this week. Fableborn, a game that was on Avalanche, has just done its first test on Ronin. Can't remember how many people was it? Can't remember. Did 500,000 of revenue and 180,000.
Fableborn 149,000.
Yeah. So again, that was so Ronin, I think, is a trend that's gone on throughout the year, and as I say, next year when it becomes a permissionless chain, so anyone can launch a project on Ronin, we're going to see we're going to see a whole bunch of junk clearly, but there's some interesting projects will go live there. So I think, if you had to sort of call it, you'd call Ronin sort of the gaming blockchain of the year, partly because there's not much competition yet, but we definitely saw that kicking in Q3, I think, as a trend.
Yeah, what I'm excited about, we should also mention throughout the year, clearly got a strong community, and now obviously expanding their infrastructure massively. Pirate Nation, Proof of Play, the US developer of Pirate Nation. It'll be interesting to see in 2025 how their vision of having other games using their infrastructure as they are expanding their own game, Pirate Nation, which they still just call sort of an experiment, which I would say is almost like Game of the Year in terms of how they've gone about building sustainability, which you saw with them launching their token, which was airdropped, and about 70% staking back their token into the ecosystem, and they got their ecosystem Proof of Play token as well. I mean, they're launching probably sometime in 2025. Not sure if they've given a date for that yet.
No, not yet. No,
not yet. So then moving into Q4, that sort of kicked off with Off the Grid, really, the launch on launching on console, PlayStation 5 and Xbox, Pioneer testing initially, and via Epic Games Store. So again, one of these games that, it's not gone mobile, but still clearly done well in terms of like really creating a buzz in the industry about what a Web3 game can achieve beyond the sort of already converted audiences, if you know what I mean.
But I would say, I think it's difficult. I would say now, a few months on from that launch, it is a little bit more nuanced, I think. And obviously, they would say, we've launched one mode. So we've launched the 3-on-3 battle royale. No, it was this extraction mode, and they've got like a big single player mode and lots of other modes. I think when I had them on the podcast, they said we've launched like 20% of our game, sort of thing. So they would say there's a lot more to come. And it launched on a really, it's obviously spent like $1 million, whatever, getting Shroud and Tim the Tapman and whoever else, Ninja, to play it on the first weekend. And they did get a massive spike of sort of Twitch users and stuff. But since then, it's not in the top 100 streamed games on Twitch. Not that Twitch is everything. I think user-wise, it sort of, again, depends a little bit on what you look at, but sort of 150,000. So for a blockchain game, actually pretty good. But because they're running their own infrastructure called Guns, everyone who plays the game is basically, a live wallet. So basically, some games, say like Guild of Guardians, they might have 100,000 people playing it and only 5,000 show up as active wallets in a day because of what you're doing in the game. With as far as I understand it, at least with Off the Grid, anyone turning up and playing the game is going to rank as a wallet. So it's a sort of one-on-one mapping. So and I think so they would say 2025 is their year, because that's when all the big stuff's going live. But I think a lot of people, a bit like me maybe, a lot of people played it at the opening weekend, realised they weren't very good. That sort of game for starters, and there's just so many games of that ilk out there. Nothing to do with blockchain, clearly. And you had Call of Duty going live, and you just have these very big, massive Web 2 games that come out, one or two a month, and everyone's sort of cycling through those. And it's just very hard to stand out against those sort of, behemoths. People spend all their time playing, Fortnite, and different modes in Fortnite coming out, and different characters in Fortnite coming out all the time, and the Fortnite creators program has all these, it's just sort of an endless amount, clearly, of content. So so again, sort of, it seems like, the first blockchain game on console. That's great that they did that and went through the technical processes of doing that. But again, a bit like launching on the App Store and going, 3 billion people have access to the App Stores. Yeah, but there's like 20 million games on there. If they're not going to play your game, it doesn't matter how many people could be playing your game if you can't get them to it. So, I think they would say, our blockchain's not even live yet. We're running on a test net. When the Guns blockchain will go live, the Guns token will go live. All the NFTs all the in-game assets people have collected in that game will become NFTs. You can trade them. So suddenly people might have hundreds of dollars worth of NFTs, if people want to trade. So they would say we're not even at the sort of starting point yet, and as an argument, I would agree with that. But it's sort of Again, I think just also goes to show that using blockchain is, it just adds a lot of complexity to game development. Is hard enough to be successful just making games. I mean, at the moment, you would say it's almost impossible to make a successful game, even with $100 million, like supposedly, Gunzilla Games raised to make this game. It's just really, really hard. Sony famously this year spent however many hundreds of millions of dollars on a game called Concord, and it just, you couldn't imagine a worse sort of experience. Really, they had to basically pull it. It was their own game, and they had to pull it from the PlayStation Store, and they sacked everyone, and it was just a total disaster.
Now you mentioned 100 million. I think it was about this time last year, end of 2023, that Nexon announced they raised 100 million for their Maple Story universe, and they've taken that to sort of a new level this year as well. It's worth mentioning. I mean, they're on Avalanche as well, just like Off the Grid and Shrapnel, and Avalanche is actually also undergone quite a change with their upgrade up to 9,000. Do you want to talk at all anything about that? Or
no, I don't. I mean, not really on Avalanche. But it is interesting you say. I mean, there are these. We're probably not going to, because we're not going to have time to go into sort of all the anticipated games. You've got an article going live on that, but there are some of these big projects, and I think Maple Story Universe is one of these. Is a big old beast, really, of what they're trying to do. It really is a universe, and they've started to have people playing. So they've had some play tests now, and some people who really like Maple Story say this is really good. And but they are, these things are just, not only are they hard to build, because not just a game, they're sort of building SDKs and platforms and allowing creators to be part of it, and then doing all the blockchain stuff in the background. And then even when you have this, you don't, if players don't really understand blockchain or don't want to trade or whatever, it doesn't just, the economy doesn't work not because you designed it, not because you designed the individual building blocks wrong, but because there's no interest by the players. So I think, those sort of things are just super complicated. And, it's easy for us. I mean, another one that as this comes to mind immediately, is the Sandbox. It's easy for us to criticize on the outside. You've been building this for like years and years and years. Why is it not out yet? This is crazy. And I think there is some, from my point of view, there is some criticism of something like the Sandbox, where I think they could have gone a bit quicker or a lot quicker. But their point of view, these are very complicated things we are building. Hundreds of developers, and the technology and the legal stuff we have to go through to get our token out or reward people, and the KYC, and we're getting people trying to hack us, and the North Koreans, and we just don't, behind the scenes, we don't know all the ramifications of all this sort of stuff, which I'm sure are horrible, horrible. But the Sandbox again, just quickly mention it. Again, another year where they've had various these alpha things. They just finished their 4th alpha. News just came out today. I think they had 580,000 individual players. They say so. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
They gave away $7 million worth of the Sand token. I think something like that's what it's worth. So and that's a good starting point. Hopefully, the thing going live in 2025. And then,
the mobile version have been sort of teasing, almost you would say, promising in 2024, which is clearly not going to come. But
no. But with that sort of like building a mobile client for something, and then Apple and Google have their own say about what you can do, and you have to redesign that. These are they are incredibly complicated. So it's facile for me to be sort of slamming people, but
less of that. More celebrate the projects that are still going despite the headwinds. CCP Games actually I thought we should mention as well. It's exciting. They launched in December, didn't they? So
it's live now. So they sort of announced. Well, they announced it in actually November 2023. They were doing I can't remember what they codenamed it then. They were doing a blockchain project in the EVE universe, and then they announced it as EVE Frontier. And then they've done various playtests. And I guess the interesting thing there is they are super hardcore, fully on chain, very much like everything's open source. Please do build. We want the community to be building stuff. The community has the same sort of development rights as we have as the developers of the game. Again, that's a project that won't be out in 2025. I would be amazed if it is. It's in closed alpha. You can buy a pass to get in there at the moment. But those sort of projects, even though they had the experience of running EVE Online for 20 years, doing this with the blockchain parts to it and open sourcing their own sort of dev tools, and then getting people to build something interesting in there, that's a multi-year project. Maybe you'd even say, 5 to 10 years to really get something. And even with EVE Online, it's not the sort of game most people just rock into and have a whale of a time. It's also, as far as I understand it, I've not played it. You have to go in and then spend 3 months learning how to not get your ship blown up immediately after leaving the sort of safe zone. But I think the one thing that is interesting is the blockchain has the people who sort of announce these sort of blockchain projects I don't think are under any illusions that this is experimental and complicated, but they are really committed to the fact they think blockchain, as in computer controlled value in a computer controlled game, is sort of the future. These are clearly not people who are doing grifting for a couple of $1 million on an NFT rug. These are people who, their careers are built around how to make games more interesting, and these people, like Nexon and others, see blockchain as being a fundamental part of that. And maybe it's not going as fast as some of us sort of bag holders want in some respects, but you can't. There's the technology side of it, which is complicated, and then there's the education side of it, as in gamers actually understand. It doesn't matter if it's an NFT or not, but you can trade these things and take them to other games, and we still have some of those very fundamental things we haven't really seen very much of yet. So it's no surprise that people don't understand. So it's good for you to point out that these sort of very big, complicated projects are still sort of rumbling away, sort of behind the scenes, maybe.
And when you say even Ubisoft launching Champions Tactics in October, and then the recent launch now with the Captain Laserhawk game. And there's been a lot of anticipation, obviously, around Champions Tactics, and also a lot of disappointment and a lot of expectations came out, and immediately there were some technical issues there, so people couldn't, but they keep on keeping on. So
no, I think, sort of my view has always been that 99.99 maybe percent of blockchain games will sort of in some ways fail, because you're trying to build an interesting experience. People will just the enjoyment of doing it. You're trying to build an economic model behind it. You're building that within an environment of crypto sentiment. So all that's going on. A lot of that stuff is outside your control, and then you're basically, for it really to work, you're sort of handing over to some degree to some community or DAO, something we haven't really talked about much in 2024, but it's always there, and you're handing it over, and you're sort of stepping away from it as a sort of like the initial developer, and these things have like never been done before. DAOs haven't really worked in blockchain or crypto per se, so building DAOs around complicate things like games, it's really, really, really sort of complicated. But I guess maybe to finish up is when we're looking at the year, I think for all the other sentiment and there's lots of reasons why things change and how we get to where we are, I think it is pretty clear that no matter what happens in 2025 might be a total disaster, but the US election was clearly a pivotal point in the year, and obviously for many other things other than blockchain, it wouldn't. But it's interesting that actually, crypto was seen. I mean, but people maybe more on the left, but the crypto community was seen as being at least one of the reasons why Donald Trump got elected. Obviously, bigger things like Elon Musk, who's sort of adjacent to the crypto community in some ways, but isn't a crypto sort of a guy. But crypto people like Coinbase and A16Z put up, or it is $250 million into the Republican sort of Republicans and Trump, a mixture of those two things. They were one of the biggest funders of political donations during that cycle, and people like Mark Andreessen was very prominent in that sort of political, with his political stance in a way that it certainly hadn't been for Trump last time. And obviously Trump himself didn't like Bitcoin last time, and now has launched NFTs and his tokens, and obviously some of these younger Trump members are really into that stuff as well. So you have this sort of weird sea change happening, and during that you have a similar thing with the sort of Democrats. I mean, at one point Kamala did say something about sort of but reference crypto, but in terms of like something for that black men.
When I should beep that bus that you said when
yeah,
John
sorry, yeah,
talking,
no, but it's just it was interesting that just in the
Trump should thank us and the community for
no.
being.
I would just say in the last cycle, crypto didn't exist at all, and this time it was interesting because one side went one way and the other side went the other way. There were lots of other ways there are lots of other sort of topics, I think, where that was encapsulated, but crypto was a sort of an interesting one for it to happen. And clearly, if Kamala had been elected as president, we wouldn't be going through this bull run and Bitcoin $100,000 and everyone assuming that there's going to be less regulation and Gary Gensler out of the SEC, and that is a very binary pivot point in the year. I think if we go from 100,000 with Trump to probably 50,000 with Kamala, and the expectation of another 4 years of Gary Gensler hitting us with a ban hammer. So I think that's I think you can overemphasize the significance of individual events, but I think it's hard to overemphasize. We'll see what Trump does with his mad tariffs and stuff, but that's sort of where we are now, I think. Yeah.
Is it any time left to go through some investment sort of sentiment throughout the year, and or should we do that for another time?
I can do it. I don't think it really changed. So this year, as I track these things quite carefully, this year will be down on 2023, which was massively down on 2022, which was down on 2021. So 2022 was the peak, and 2023 was down a lot. And this year we'll be lucky if we break $1 billion from what I'm tracking at the moment. I think we're about 915. Obviously, sentiment is picking up now, so next year will probably be better than this year. But I guess the other interesting thing was a lot of the investment this year was from like crypto retailers and crypto only funds, and a lot of that was sort of spent in the first Q1, and then people started losing money and stopped investing. We've still not seen a lot of what we might call institutional investors and sort of people who invest in Web 2 and Web 3 games. We've not seen them come back really with any force. I mean, A16Z mentioned they have a games fund. They've done a bit of stuff, but not very much. A16 crypto fund, they're not doing writing big checks at the moment. They're doing more sort of these accelerator programs that they run themselves, and they invest a couple of million into the ones they think are good. So the model's definitely changed from even like the first half of 2022. Obviously we'd expect in 2025 sentiment's going to be better. Interest rates are maybe going to be a bit higher than we thought. But that sort of stuff, that sort of sentiment takes time to build back up. But if token prices stay the same, we will start to see more of that. But I think the other thing, you go through a cycle of basically people were doing no due diligence on these projects and giving away, money and, sort of just to finish, not to slam them, but, Illuvium, which raised over $150 million, mainly through NFT sales, but also about 50 million, I think, through VCs. It's basically saying we need to go and get some more money. And, I kind of think you can do that a couple of times, but then the normal VC is just like, you had 150 million, if you can't get it to work, we're not giving you any more. And even then, they're saying their burn rate's like $900,000 a month, which is insane for what they're trying to do. So I think
not to slam them. I'm just going to slam them.
Well, no, I mean,
no, you're right.
It's a learning experience. But I think from an investor's hat on, which obviously I do some involved in some investment community stuff. We're not. It was hard to say even now how weird 2022 and early 2023 was in terms of what you get pitched and what people were asking for in terms of valuation.
Yeah.
And even though their valuations have come right down, there's just still not that appetite. And obviously, we haven't really mentioned it. We won't do it so much in this one, but AI has clearly taken that narrative. AI agents are a big thing, but that will help blockchain gaming. But blockchain games, I think, it's going to be a while before we go through, if ever, a cycle of blockchain games being able to raise $30 million on the fact they've got AI agents. I just kind of think when they're the new shiny thing, you get one shot, 1 year at sort of raising at that level. So we'll be. I think
on a positive note, then. So, final question: why is Web3 gaming still inevitable? No, you're not wearing a hat. But
I've never been very sure about that sort of phrase. I mean, Sam's a good marketing guy, so it's a good phrase and people use it. I think, as I say, I think 99% of blockchain games will fail. So I think blockchain gaming is inevitable in the sense that value will be created in these games that will be interchangeable via players and will be owned by players. There will be that sort of agency within players. Goes back to something John Linden from Mythical Games always says: is players love their games and they want to own more things of their games. And if you can, you buy a plushie or own the special edition version of the game and buy the baseball cap of the game, you can actually own a character in a game. People will just go, yeah, of course I want to do that. Quite how you get them there is the issue. So, Web3 games is inevitable. I think hopefully we'll start to look back on that as a sort of a dated sort of meme. And I think we'll, over time, I just start to think that the games that are doing this well will start to become very obvious. It won't be like, you won't be going, what's Immutable's sort of poster child? There will be a very obvious game on Immutable that's doing really well. Like I think Pixels on Ronin is the best example we have now, and Axion on Ronin was the best example. But you just have these games that are just, behemoths, maybe 10 years down the line, but $1 trillion economies, and maybe you won't want to play that game. Maybe it won't be a game style that you like very much, but it'll be unavoidable that there are these very big sort of entertainment economies that may have different games within them, or all this sort of stuff. But that's the thing. People will want to own their stuff. Good. And as soon as and every game will have that. What the blockchain infrastructure on the back end, who knows? But people will basically want to own their skins. So that's the winning formula.
Good. Right. On that note, it's time to finish up and say Happy Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, and a lot. And see you all next year. Bye-bye.
Bye.